to this lesson. This time we're going to go ahead and make a slightly better camera script so the camera doesn't go out of the bounds of where we want to see it. So the first thing I want to do, last time we made this player into a prefab, but actually I made a mistake. We shouldn't do that quite yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our hierarchy. I want you to right click on player, go down to prefab, and then go to unpack completely. And this will turn this back into a regular object. And then you can go ahead and click in your project prefabs player and click delete. And we can go ahead and delete that. And we're good. Make sure to unpack completely first, and then I want you to go ahead and drag this main camera out here. So it's its own thing. And we're going to go ahead and create a script for this camera to follow the player around. So I'm going to go to scripts, and I'm in here, I'm going to right click, go to create, C# script, and I'm going to call this camera follow script. And then I'm going to double click to open up our Visual Studio. Now for this, we're going to need several things. First off, we don't need a start method. We do need our void update. So previously, we've been making everything public, and that's generally fine. It actually doesn't matter most of the time, but good practices say we make things private that need to be private. So I'm going to do private game object. We're going to call it target player. And I want to show you something. So right now, since I put it at private, I'm going to go back to our Unity window, click on main camera, go down to the bottom, and I'm going to go to add camera follow script. And if you notice, we can't see our variable there. And the reason we can't see our variable there, when it's public, you can see the variable, but when it's private, you can't see the variable in the Unity inspector. So in order to be able to see it, we need a special tag. We need to say serialize field right before the word private. And the only thing this does is make it so that your tag, or your variable, shows up in the inspector. It's going to appear here when it reloads. See, now it appears there. So we're going to go back in, and we're going to create a couple more variables. We're going to create, again, serialize field, private float, y minimum, and this is going to be the minimum distance, the lower distance for our camera to follow, and then serialize field. By the way, when this shows an autocomplete, if you hit tab, it'll choose the top option. So right here, private, if I hit tab, it'll fill that in for me. And private float y maximum. And the y maximum is going to be the maximum distance that our camera is going to follow. So now, when we go into here, we need to have two conditions. We need to have one condition that says if it's within the follow distance, follow the y and the x. Go up and down and left and right. And if it's outside the y distance, then we only want it to follow the left and the right. We don't want it to continue going up or continue going down. So I'm going to say, let's see, I'm going to say move y camera, and we're going to say if target player, and this target player here is going to be our player. But you could also use this script to target literally anything. If you're playing a soccer game, you could make the target player the soccer ball, and it'll follow the soccer ball. It'll follow whatever you assign this target to. Okay. If target player dot transform dot position dot y, so his y position is greater than y minimum. So if the target player's transform dot position y is greater than the minimum, so if it's above the minimum number, ampersand ampersand for and, target player dot transform dot position dot y is less than y maximum. So this looks confusing just seeing it, but basically what it's saying is if our target, which is going to be our player, oops, Here we go. If our target is below the minimum, or below the maximum, so if he's below the maximum distance right here, and he's above the minimum distance, then we want it to follow. But if he's outside of these range, we don't want it to follow. So we're going to say this, and remember this is going to be the camera, this.transform.position equals, before we were doing plus equals, we were adding, this time we want to set it to be equal to new vector3 target player dot transform dot position dot x. So we want it to have the same position as the player. So when the player moves, it's going to follow to the same position. This is the x value. The y value is going to be target player dot transform dot position dot y. So we want it to be the same position as the player as well, the x and the y. And then don't put this as 0. Before we've been putting this as 0, but this time if you put it as 0, it's going to make half of the things in the game invisible because they're going to be behind the camera. Remember, by default, z is at -10. So we're just going to say this.transform.position.z. So we don't want it to change. It's going to stay equal to itself, and then a semicolon. So if the player is within the bounds, if he's above the minimum and below the maximum, we want the x and y to follow. So the camera's position will be the player's position x, the player's position y, and its own position z. So from there, we need to have a condition if the player is outside the bounds. We're going to say move. Move only x camera. And we're going to put an else statement here. So if you have an if followed by an else, it means if this is true, do this thing in here. In all other instances, do this here. Elses are really good statements for catch-all. They're good for catching errors, etc. For example, we could say else print player moved out of bounds. Something like that if we wanted. But we don't want to. So what we want to do when he's outside the y minimum and maximum, we want only the x value to move. So we still want the left and right movement. So we're going to say this.transform.position equals new vector3 target player.transform.position.x, same as above, right? We still want the x, we want the camera's x to move. And for the y, we're going to change it to this.transform.position.y. And this means it's going to stay at its current position. It's not going to change. And then we're going to do this.transform.position.z. Finished. Okay. This is a lot of typing. Write it a few times, internalize it, figure out what it means. You're going to kind of sort of get it right now. But if you read it a few times, it's going to become a lot more clear, and I think you're going to start understanding positioning more. Okay, and that's actually all that we need for this script, so hit Control and S to save it, and go back into Unity. Now we're going to go to our camera, and since we already added the script, I'm going to go to Target Player, and I'm going to make sure I'm in the scene mode, not the assets. We don't want anything in our files. We want something on our active scene. And I'm going to say player. It's going to target the player. Okay. Okay. And now to get the y minimum and y maximum, we need to look at our player, our camera. So I'm going to click on our camera. I'm going to click over here, press W to get these lines up here. You can click on here or press W. I'm going to scroll this all the way to the top, very top there. I want to make sure I don't have any black in the background showing. And it looks like we're at we're at positive 1.38. So I'm going to just say 1.35 for our maximum. And we're going to scroll down to the bottom here. You can also use this view right here to see what you're seeing in your camera. Right about there, 1.4. So positive 1.3 to negative 1.4. So for the minimum, I'm going to put negative 1.4, and for the positive, I'm going to put 1.3. Now, our player is going to follow the y value as long as our player is within these distances here, and he's going to always follow the x value. So, if I turn my music way down here, if I press play, I can see the camera follows me up to here and follows me down to there. And that's going to be it for today's lesson. I'll see you in the next one.